How does it feel?
It feels comfy. It's a nice tall back. I mean, I can't lay my head back, but that's okay. I usually don't lounge in chairs.
It's no lazy boy, but
Yeah.
so I think it's a vintage chair that's been reupholstered because
Yeah.
I can tell from the wood, but the fabric looks newer.
Yeah, once we get it apart, we'll see if we can find any brand or anything on it.
Well, what makes it perfect for this chair that we want to do is that it's got this wood trim on the sides and the fronts, and we're going to be exposing all the wood in the back. It has a nice stopping point right here for upholstery, because when you have to pull it over, then you have to have like this weird trim stuff back here, and we won't have to do that because we'll just come here and around there and there with the trim.
Yep.
And if it didn't have the wood, then we'd have to go all the way around. And it's not super poofy. So what we're gonna do with this chair is we're gonna, Zeb is gonna completely rip it apart, remove any staples. We're actually gonna take out all the batting, all the foam, because we're going to be completely starting from the ground up. So we've gotta get everything off before we can get the fun stuff on.
So I like to wear gloves. Leather gloves work. These mechanic gloves give me better motion on my hands. So I'm gonna start. Easiest thing to do. So I feel like I accomplished something right off the bat. This particular cushion is zippered. Looks like someone cut this foam out of something else, but we're gonna use it because it's the perfect size. It's already pre-cut for us. This is definitely replacement. It's got kind of a memory foam feel, so not original to the chair. Tools of the trade. Needle nose pliers, just some square nose pliers, flathead screwdriver, and some scissors. So I've got this one lonely brad down here. So it's got this upholstery brad right down here in the corner. I'm gonna go under the fabric because it was sunk down pretty deep. Just pull that out with the screwdriver. Now I've got this corner that's up. Grab the pliers, and it takes a little bit of muscle. This might have a tack strip on it, which if it does, that is even better. It does, so I can grab a hold of that. We probably won't reuse that. Give it a little roll.
No, because we're not gonna leave the back open, so we won't be reusing it at all.
And then now that that's up, I can just pop it all the way along. This whole back part's gonna come off. Pop both sides loose. This is why you wear the gloves. Those tack strips are sharp. Now I've got a little bit I can grab a hold of and rip this whole bottom fabric. If you can't rip it for whatever reason, use the scissors, cut it. You can pull the staples out later. Same with this top. This one's stapled. Now we've got this exposed back, which is this cool burlap. We're gonna leave that exposed. And this is where the front pulls through to upholster that. That's gonna require some pliers. So I don't do a lot of pulling unless I think the fabric will rip. I roll the staple out. So I pulled all the staples off the back so that this is free. And now I'm just gonna go in here up underneath. There's a few staples here. And then these brads, these nails here, tacks, I don't know what the proper name is for them. We're not professional upholsterers. Just showing you the tools I've got and how I do it. All right, so this is gonna be a rip job because it's coming off. We get a lot of comments on, that's not how you're supposed to upholster. Okay, I'm just showing you how I do it. No one ever showed me how the proper way to upholster was, so we figured it out on our own.
The Jami and Zeb Ray.
All right, so that wasn't wanting to pull, so I'm just gonna roll it. And then just pull right out of those staples. I can come back through and get those staples out. So I've got real stain number 3, and I'm just taking it and going lightly over where the chair wasn't exposed, where it was never intended to be seen, because some of these spots are probably going to be exposed with our deconstructed look. And it probably won't darken them up and make them look the exact same color, but it'll get it close. I'll probably do 2 coats of this and darken them up a bit. But the number 3 has a little bit of a reddish tone to it, which will hopefully match some of this down here a little better.
So we're ready to get started upholstering. I don't want this cushion to be separate because I don't even know how to sew. So that's kind of a moot point. And I don't have time to wait for somebody to sew me a cushion. So I'm just gonna make it attached and permanent to the piece. I've cut a piece of fabric and I've allotted enough fabric to go underneath here. And then I've got enough fabric to go through the back this way. And then I made sure I'd had enough on each side so I could come underneath the armrest. It's better to have too much fabric than too little. So just keep that in mind. I usually just kind of lay it out and guesstimate how much I'm gonna need and then add a little bit on all the sides. You need to put this piece of fabric is gonna go underneath the back of the wingback chair. So what you have to do is you're gonna have to make 2 cuts, a cut here and a cut there, and then kind of shove that back in there and fit it, and then we'll make some more cuts. Okay, so the next cut is gonna be here and here, and these flaps are gonna go underneath the arm. So I kind of line it up where the edge of this piece is. Like you can see it goes to right there. So I kind of feel it and it goes to right here. So my cut's gonna be here. That way this flap can go underneath here. There we go. We're going to do that same cut to this flap on the other side. Like I said, you kind of line it up with where the edge of this is, so it's kind of at an angle, if that makes sense. This is a real square edge before because this was a separately sewn cushion. We don't have batting. I would suggest probably laying some batting over to soften the edge, but for not wanting to make a 50th trip to Hobby Lobby today, I just cut the edge of this so that way when I pull it around, you can see that there's not like a real sharp edge there. It's a little trick, saves you some time. I'm using striped fabric. Striped fabric is probably one of the more difficult fabrics to do because they're striped, they have to be straight. So I made sure that all the stripes are straight, and I'm taking my fabric and I'm gonna be stapling it down on the bottom underneath here because this will have a dust cover all the way around it when I'm done. So I'm just gonna take the fabric and pull really taut and get my middle staple in there. I'm using my pneumatic staple gun. You can use a handheld. This has 1/2 inch 18 gauge staples in it, or you can use upholstery staples, but make sure you're using heavy duty and not light duty staples because you want them to stay in. Okay, I'm just stapling the back. I had Zeb check the front, and I'm gonna be, because this is exposed, it's actually probably more difficult than if I had a closed back because there's things I wouldn't normally worry about, but because we're leaving the back open, I've gotta be neat. So I'm stapling this top piece. I'm just gonna staple along this wood ledge here, trim it as close as possible, and then that will get a piece of trim to cover up the staples. I'm trimming as close as possible. Hopefully it's neat enough. Okay. So this is what it's gonna look like. I'm gonna hot glue this trim over the top so it will kind of cover a lot of the imperfections up here and just tidy it up a little bit. Some people, instead of using this, instead of using these staples that aren't really attractive, they use the old-fashioned hammer and nail, and they hammer and nail the edge in, but that's way more work than I want to put into it. So I'm just gonna cover up all of my edges with this. Okay, so we're doing the sides. I'm folding this side in just a little bit so that way it's a little bit neater edge, and I'm coming up under this edge. And then I've got this back piece here and I folded this edge under. This is where if you cut right, you'll be okay. If you didn't cut right, you'll have to really cover it up with some trim. And it's okay if it's not perfect because it's supposed to look like a deconstructed chair. It's kind of funny because it's supposed to look messy, but if it's too messy, then it looks bad. So it's like a oxymoron. I'm gonna trim this up as close as possible. Little scissors are actually better, but I don't have any handy. Zeb's gonna fix this for me later because this was all his idea. Right, Zeb?
Right. I'm pretty excited about this chair. I love this look. Got a very industrial vibe, but it works in your farmhouse.
Thank you, Restoration Hardware, for making it super popular. All right, this is the last side on the bottom, and then we have, I'll show you how to kind of neatly tidy up these corners, and then we'll get moved to the arms, and then last we'll do the back, which is actually gonna be a grain sack, which anybody that follows me, I know you're shocked that I'm using a grain sack, but I am. Okay. So I'm tucking this in, and I'm taking this side. Sometimes you have to rip out batting. It gets a little crazy.
Well, you don't want it to be lumpy.
Yeah. And you want to make sure that you're straight. Always check your stripes on your seat because you just want it to be nice and taut, but you also don't want to have puckers in it. So I've done a lot of upholstery, but I've never done a deconstructed chair, and every chair is different. So when you're doing your chair, you may have to amend things to make it work. And I did this off camera because I wasn't really sure how I was going to end it. I wound up cutting the fabric right here and leaving this entire corner open because if I came to here, I would have to come down this way with trim and then come across the leg right here. And I think it would be funny to have trim here and then not trim over there, but I know that I didn't want to go around the edge. So I tucked the fabric and folded it along this rounded edge here and pulled it down, and I cut off the excess, and then I just came around the bottom. So I actually had to pull it apart down here so I could redo this piece so that way there were no like wrinkles or puckers. The only part that I have right here is this pleat, and what I will come back through when I'm hot gluing all the trim on, I will actually use the Gorilla hot glue and hot glue that pleat in so that way it stays nice and taut. And I know some of you are gonna say, that's lazy, blah, blah, blah. Trust me, I have used it on a ton of furniture that I've done and it has never come apart. It's important that you're using high temp Gorilla glue sticks, but it will keep that plate nice and taut, and then I'll come down this way with trim and cover up those staples. Pull this down and pleat, and then pull this over and pleat again. That's kind of how you get that pleat in, and you can come back and fix it in a little bit. And then come from under here. This extra here I'm just gonna trim off. It'll all go underneath the dust cover, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so I'm gonna be doing a grain sack on the back. This is a authentic vintage antique grain sack. It's been washed. I do on occasion sell them in my retail space in Lehi, so you can always PM me and see if I have any in stock. So I'm gonna take this and put it on the back and fit it to size. I'm gonna shove this down the bottom here. And then I'm going to figure out where center is. This needs to be snipped so that way it can go around. There's a bar in the back. So I'm gonna take and cut this right about here. I trimmed this other side here and I'm just tucking this on under the middle here, and we're gonna pull it through the edge, and then we'll also tuck this edge here in each side. Zeb's gonna do that for me because I have a hard time with it, but you get the idea. You push it in here and then you push it in there, and then we'll pull it taut.
So you can't see, but there's a little slot between the wood back here, and I'll show you in just a second. And I've just worked it into that slot, and I'm just pulling it on through and working it around. So this is that slot I was talking about in between the framework. And once you got it through, just pull it around tight here. All right, same thing on the front. There's a little slot between the wing here and the back. I'm just gonna poke that through. And it's pretty narrow. Sometimes they'll barely let you fit a finger width through there. Once you get a little bit through, sometimes it's easier to pull the back instead of push.
All right, so it's super important to make sure that your margins are still correct, because I'm gonna snip here and you're only gonna get one chance to snip. You just have to snip here because this is gonna get folded under and pulled around, and then this is gonna get pulled through the back. So you have to snip where this, see my finger right there? You have to snip that far down. That way you can pull this through. And this part here will get folded under. You guys see that? We still have to smooth all the wrinkles out here, but that kind of gets you the idea. So you snip it, pull that part through there, and then this gets folded under. And then this will get upholstered. This side piece will get upholstered separately. We're gonna take this top, and I'm gonna do this first. And what I like to do to keep the tension even is I'm gonna upholster this top piece here and make sure it's nice and centered. Then I will do the bottom piece, and then I'll do left and right. Instead of doing like this side, that side, and work my way around, it's better to do top and bottom, and then left and right, and that way you get even tension and less wrinkles. So I'm gonna be trimming this off when I'm done. I'm gonna come to like right here and try to go as straight as possible because I'm gonna cover it up with trim. So I'm gonna staple along this line, and then we'll cut here, and this is where the trim will go. You want to pull this as tight as possible, but you don't want to distort the stripes on the front. So when you pull this and you do this one side, you gotta have to look as you're going and make sure it's right. And then when you do the other side, make sure it's pulled just as taut. All right, day 2 of the project. We didn't quite finish yesterday because I ran out of fabric, but Zeb went to the fabric store. In fact, he had to go like 3 towns away to get it because our Hobby Lobby was out. And we are doing the sides. Okay. I'm just seeing if it will fit. I'm doing this whole arm and around this top part with one piece of fabric. So I cut it to have a little, I don't know, wing up here and then go down this way. And I've got a few bars to contend with. So we're going to have to make a snip here at the top, a snip at the bottom. So actually this I'll just have to cut so it goes under. So we're gonna have a snip that goes here so we can go over the top. And that will cover this whole wing. I think in this case, this is probably the most difficult piece because you've got so many different cuts, and it looks like it would be easy because it's small, but there's a lot going on here, and every chair is gonna be slightly different. So when you're laying out your piece, think about where the bars are and where you have to pull through, and that will let you know where you're gonna be cutting on your individual piece. So we're starting with the arm first because this has to be just right to come around the edge. Everything else we can fudge and move around a little bit. So you do want to have most of your cuts done though prior to doing this, just so you can make sure your fabric is mostly where it's going to stay. And I'm actually, on this chair, I'm going to roll this under, I'm going to staple it underneath, and I'm going to come around, and then I will be snipping off this. It will go under this decorative part here, and I will staple it up to the decorative part here and trim around, and there will be trim that goes on this. And that's all the side will get. This will be completely open. And then this will come around this way, and I'll staple it onto here. I cut off this extra fabric here because it's easier to do before you get it all stapled, and I'm just folding it under and pulling it nice and tight. That way I get a nice neat edge and not a big bulge over there. So right here, I've got one little fold that I'm doing, and you probably won't even notice it once it's trimmed out. Then I'm gonna come over to this other side, and we're gonna get a slight little pleat there. I try to minimize pleats, but sometimes it's hard. And then when I put the trim, you won't really see it. And I'm just gonna staple. I'm gonna go ahead and trim this a little bit now. It'll make it for less work later. Now, if you're good at making patterns, I guess you could make a pattern and make it perfect before you get started, but I just kind of lay my fabric out. See that? Now that'll fit nice and neat in there, and I won't have to trim it later. Be very careful when you're cutting. I would say that most of my upholstery mistakes have been from cutting incorrectly. So if you have to slow down when you're cutting, no worries. Okay, so next we're gonna be pulling this through the back. I waited to do this cut here because this is where I'm just adjusting my stripes and just making sure that everything is right and pulled where it's supposed to be. And so this is the last cut I'm making around this bar.
There you go.
So it's this bar here that we're cutting for, so I'm just gonna come down in here, grab my fabric where the bar is gonna hit, and just kind of pull. You can always adjust as needed. So do a little cut, and then pull it into place, and then if you need to pull it, see how I'm ripping it just a little tiny bit? This is gonna get a nice fit. You can see there's like this little wrinkle down there. So we're gonna pull this just a little bit more around the bar. So I'm gonna go ahead and staple around here, and then I can adjust this as needed. What I'm doing with my fingers is I'm just feeling for the edge of where the trim's gonna go. I'm folding over this part right here, but I'm using my hand to smooth out all my stripes. I'm pulling on this fabric back here, making sure I don't have any funky pleats or ruffles or ridges. And then I can staple here. It's all gonna get trimmed off. And then the last piece, we're gonna come around here. So you have two options. If you pull this way, you're gonna get air. You're gonna see between here and here. And if you had a back, that would kind of hide that. I normally pull this way. So I'm gonna pull this way and then see what it looks like to then pull it back to here and see if that hides this batting, and then it also allows no peeky boos on the front. All right, so I'm just coming right in right here and trimming this up because this is gonna get some trim. So I am using Gorilla hot glue sticks. I just found these. I used to use high temp, but these are even better. 5 times more durable than your regular glue sticks, and they bond wood, metal, glass, plastic, everything. So they bond to plastic or they bond to metal, which is what the staples are. They also bond to fabric, and they bond to wood, which is important. They're impact tough, and you can work with it for up to 45 seconds, which is great. It gives you more time to get where you want with the trim. And it's also weather resistant, which is gonna go in your house. But let's just say it's kid resistant. Like if they spill something on it, it's not gonna come off. I have used a bunch over the times, and this, like seriously, the staples will come out before this comes off. So definitely important. I just have a cheap glue gun, bought it at Hobby Lobby. It's a high temp, which is important. You may burn yourself. Something to keep in mind with your trim. I bought this trim at Hobby Lobby, but see how it's like see-through and then thick here? I like to put the glue just on this braided part because it gets all over your fingers and you might lose fingertips. So you might want to wear, if you have like some gloves or something, that would protect your manicure and your fingers. Luckily, my manicure is tough and my fingers are too, so I don't wear gloves. All right, I'm just gonna go right over the top of my staples. I've only got a 3/4 inch trim, so I've got to make sure that this trim is covering up all my staples in that 3/4 of an inch, and I just try to make sure that there's not like any fabric sticking out that side. It covers a lot of mistakes. Here's a mistake I made. When I was putting this fabric around this way, for whatever reason, this fabric was really short here and I couldn't pull it up to here. But when I put my trim across here, I'll kind of hot glue that and you'll never know that there's no fabric underneath it. And you're just gonna put this everywhere that the staples are. I'm not gonna bore you and show that. I'll show you like up close when we're all done. But just everywhere that there's staples, that's where this goes. And if you wanted to use brads, like if you want to be real fancy, you could hammer in brads and do a braided edge. Or if you want to use the upholstery tacks instead of a staple gun, then you wouldn't have to do this. And some people just like that raw edge, which is fine. I'm just not a huge fan. Zeb likes it, huh, Zeb?
Yeah,
Zeb likes,
I like it.
Zeb likes the deconstructed.
I like the full-on deconstructed look, like halfway done being built.
But this was my, well, it's not halfway done being built because you can tell that it was covered at one point.
Yeah.
This is my compromise, is I kind of tidied it up a little bit with this trim. And you can see we've got a few more things that we missed. We'll get those out. So I guess if you want it to not be super tidy, then you don't need to put the trim on. And if you want to clean it up and make it look a little more finished, the trim's a good option.
This is the receipt trick so she doesn't burn her fingers.
This is, yeah, otherwise known as saving my fingertips a little bit because I'm having to push a lot in this part here. And you might see a little bit, but what I'll do, let's see, got some loose.
It's been a little harder since we are leaving it deconstructed. You don't get to hide everything by
Yeah.
covering it up with other
I
fabric.
think it would be, like, this is not an easy way out, for sure. It would be easier to just cover this all up. Some people think that it's lazy to do a deconstructed chair, and I'm telling you, it's more work. But the look is really cool, very farmhouse. And a chair like this would be so expensive to rebuy. This chair, I'm probably in it like 75 bucks tops. And to buy this chair, I mean, minimum you're looking at probably $400 or $500, and maybe closer to $1,000 depending on, like, if you were to have it custom done, you're probably looking about $1,000 at a good shop. And this way I can use the fabrics that I want and also an actual authentic grain sack.
I'm sitting here on my stool because if I was standing and Jimmy was sitting, you'd be.
Yeah, we just try to always get in the same spot. It's a little hard with our height differences. But anyways, we're gonna make this concise because this is a long video. Upholstery videos always are. We just have to give you all the details because we want you to be able to actually do it at home. Couple of things. If you're wanting to do a chair like this, but you're like, I don't like deconstructed, Zeb's gonna post the link for our couch video. If you scroll through the couch video to the end, how I put the back on the couch is exactly the way you would put the back on a chair, only it's just not quite as long.
Yeah, and I think the same for covering the sides. That couch also has.
Yeah, it had the
arms,
same wooden.
so.
It had a wooden frame all the way across.
Yeah, so the sides would be the same way to finish those as well.
So if you watch that video, then you'll know how to do a wingback chair that's not deconstructed. If you like the deconstructed and you don't like the trim, you can just leave your staples exposed or your nails or whatever, but we went ahead and added the trim just to give it a little bit more of a finished look. It's the kind of the best of both worlds. And we're going to be sure to take lots of pictures.
Yeah, it's actually going to live in the basement, but we got to find another chair, so we'll have like a whole basement tour here soon.
Yeah, we need one more. We'll do it to match. Stay tuned for pictures and glamour shots of this chair. Zeb's going to make sure you get to see all the good angles so you can get up close and personal. If you've got questions about the upholstery that I did, comment below and we will answer them. I am not professionally trained. I just kind of showed myself, but I kind of find that the way I do things makes it so like your average person can accomplish the same thing without having to go to upholstery school.
Yeah, this was a $25 chair at a thrift store that was going to get thrown out if no one bought it. I mean, for 25 bucks, we basically saved it, so to speak.
And awesome, deconstructed, grain sack.
I think
perfect.
it turns out awesome, and we've had several chairs that Jamie has upholstered, and they hold up great. Like, we've never had any issues with staples ripping out or anything. We use all kinds of fabrics.
Yep, I'm gonna Scotch guard it. Comment with questions, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe to Jami Ray Vintage for more
DIY.